Manny Pacquiao fought for 26 years, 8 weight classes, 62 wins, 39 knockouts, world titles that stretched from 112 pounds all the way to 147. But not every fight was the same. Some opponents were just opponents, and some were dangerous in a way that changed everything, that forced Pacquiao to find something inside himself that comfortable victories never required. These are the 10 most dangerous rivals he ever faced. Pacquiao came from General Santos City, poverty so complete that he fought his early career for money his family needed to eat. He arrived in America in 2001 as a name nobody knew and a fighter nobody had heard of. What happened next across 20 years and 10 weight classes is one of the greatest stories the sport has ever told. Deset, Lehlo Ledwaba, the 23rd of June, 2001. MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas. The undercard of Oscar De La Hoya versus Javier Castillejo. Nobody in the building knew who Manny Pacquiao was. Ledwaba was the IBF Super Bantamweight champion, a South African southpaw with experience, skill, and a chin that had never been broken in a professional fight. He was a significant favorite. The original challenger had pulled out 2 weeks before the fight with a training injury, and Pacquiao had stepped in as a late replacement with 2 weeks' notice against a champion he had never studied and had barely prepared for. Larry Merchant was calling the fight for HBO. He said on air afterward, "I had never seen him, and frankly, I'd never heard of him. But I've seen and heard of him now, and I want to see him again." What Merchant had watched was the speed differential that would define the next 15 years of Pacquiao's career. Ledwaba was not a slow fighter, he was an IBF champion. He had earned that title against serious opposition. But Pacquiao's left hand was arriving before Ledwaba's brain had fully processed that it had been thrown. Ledwaba went down in the second round, then twice more in the sixth. Referee Joe Cortez stopped it at 59 seconds of round 6 with Ledwaba on his back and the crowd on its feet. Pacquiao had just won his second world title on 2 weeks' notice against a man he had never studied. And America had discovered something it had never seen before. Ledwaba was number 10 because he was the beginning. The man who introduced Pacquiao to the world, the opponent whose defeat announced clearly, unmistakably, on HBO in Las Vegas that a different kind of fighter had arrived. Numeral 9, Marco Antonio Barrera, the 15th of November, 2003. Alamodome, San Antonio, Texas. Barrera was 57-3, a Mexican legend, a future Hall of Famer whose resume included victories over Naseem Hamed, Eric Morales twice, Johnny Tapia, and Kevin Kelly. The Ring magazine's top-rated featherweight, considered one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. He was a 4-1 favorite to beat Pacquiao. Years later, Barrera said, "I regret having made that decision because he gave me the beating of my life." What happened at the Alamodome was not a competitive fight. The referee credited Pacquiao with a knockdown in the first-round replays, showed it was a slip. It did not matter. By round 3, the knockdown that was not a slip arrived and put Barrera on the canvas legitimately. 11 rounds of Pacquiao's combinations landing on a man who had seen everything boxing could produce, and finding that nothing in his experience had prepared him for this specific speed, this specific power, this specific relentlessness that refused to let him breathe or reset or find the rhythm that his style required. Barrera's corner threw in the towel at 2 minutes and 56 seconds of round 11. The boxing world that had expected Barrera to handle the young Filipino stepped back and reconsidered everything it thought it knew. Barrera was number 9 because he was the first real statement. The fight that told the sport not quietly, not ambiguously that Manny Pacquiao was operating at a level that established legends could not contain. 8. Eric Morales. 3 fights, 3 different stories. First fight the 19th of March, 2005. The only man between 1,999 and 2012 who beat Manny Pacquiao. Morales won a unanimous decision over 12 rounds that exposed something Pacquiao's previous opponents had not fully managed: the ability to control distance, disrupt rhythm, and make the Filipinos' combinations land less cleanly than they had landed on everyone else. Pacquiao's only loss across a 7-year stretch of dominance. The rematch, the 21st of January 2006. Pacquiao came back, stopped Morales in round 10, the first time in Morales' career that any man had knocked him out. The third fight, the 18th of November 2006. Round 3. Morales dropped to one knee and looked at his corner and shook his head. It was over. But the first fight, the 12 rounds that produced the only Pacquiao defeat of that entire era, was what put Morales at number 8. Because Morales showed the boxing world something that mattered. Pacquiao could be beaten. Not easily. Not permanently. The rematch and the third fight confirmed that the first result did not reflect the true balance between them. But it could be done. And the man who did it was the most technically dangerous Mexican fighter Pacquiao had faced to that point in his career. The rivalry that followed 3 fights, the full range of results, Pacquiao winning 2 and losing 1, defined the first chapter of everything that came next. The Mexican trilogy was over. 3 fights against Barrera, 3 against Morales. The 9-fight series with Mexico's Big 3, Barrera, Morales, and the man who would become Pacquiao's greatest rival had established something the boxing world had not seen in the lighter weight classes in a generation. A fighter who got better with every serious test. Not just maintained his level. Got better. The 4 names remaining in this countdown would prove that point more completely than anything the Mexican trilogy had produced. Numeral 7, Oscar de la Hoya. The 6th of December, 2008. MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas. No title was at stake. The fight was made at a catchweight of 145 pounds. Pacquiao coming up to meet De La Hoya partway between their natural weight classes. Oscar scaled 145. Pacquiao came in at 142. The boxing world was divided about what to expect. De La Hoya was 35 years old, coming off a loss to Steve Forbes in his previous fight, a result that had raised serious questions about whether the Golden Boy's best years were behind him. But his physical advantages over Pacquiao were significant. Bigger, taller, longer reach. A man who had competed at the elite level across 6 weight classes for 15 years and had faced and beaten some of the most celebrated fighters of his generation. Pacquiao was moving up to a weight class he had never competed in before. The word farce was repeated often in the weeks before the fight. Then the bell rang. Round 1. Pacquiao's speed was visible immediately. De La Hoya, a man whose hand speed had been one of his defining assets across his entire career, looked slow by comparison. The combinations that Pacquiao threw arrived before De La Hoya's defense had registered the opening that produced them. Round after round, Pacquiao dominated, moved, landed, made De La Hoya miss and made him pay for missing with the specific combination punching that Freddie Roach had spent 7 years refining in the wild card gym. By round 8, De La Hoya's corner had seen enough. They did not send him out for round 9. Oscar De La Hoya, 6-time world champion, the most commercially successful boxer of his generation, the Golden Boy, whose career had produced some of the biggest nights in boxing history, retired on his stool. Never fought again. Pacquiao had walked into the biggest weight class of his career, against the biggest name he had ever faced and produced the most one-sided performance of his peak years. De La Hoya at number 7, because the significance of the fight went beyond the result. This was the night the boxing world stopped qualifying its assessment of Pacquiao. He was not good for his size, not extraordinary for a lighter weight fighter moving up. He was simply extraordinary. 6. Ricky Hatton, May through 2009, MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas. 25,000 British fans had crossed the Atlantic to watch Ricky Hatton fight. The noise inside the MGM Grand was unlike anything the arena had produced in years, a wall of British support that observers described as physically felt in the chest. Hatton was beloved in a way that transcended boxing, a man from Manchester whose willingness to stand in front of the hardest punchers alive and refuse to move backward had made him the most popular British fighter of his generation. He was 45-2 going in. His only losses to Floyd Mayweather and Paulie Malignaggi, both stoppages, both fights that had raised questions about his chin. Pacquiao's trainer, Freddie Roach, made a prediction in the weeks before the fight. He said it would not go 3 rounds. Round 1. Pacquiao put Hatton down midway through the round, then again just before the bell. 2 knockdowns. Round 1. The 25,000 British fans went quiet. Round 2. With 1 second remaining as the 10-second warning signaled the end of the round, Pacquiao landed a left cross flush on Hatton's chin. Hatton fell face first, unconscious, before his body finished falling, stiff, still. The ringside medical personnel moving immediately. The fight was over at 2 minutes and 59 seconds of the second round. The Ring magazine named it Knockout of the Year. Hatton said afterward he never saw it coming. Nobody in the building saw it coming either. Hatton at number 6, because what happened in round 2 was not just a knockout. It was the most devastating finish of Pacquiao's career. A left hand thrown with such precision and at such speed that one of the toughest men in boxing was unconscious before he could register that it had landed. 5. Miguel Cotto, November 8 Pot Bless, 2070, MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas. Miguel Cotto was the WBO welterweight champion, a Puerto Rican fighter who had built his career on the toughness that the island had always produced, the willingness to stand in front of the hardest punchers alive and absorb what they delivered without moving backward. He had beaten Shane Mosley, had beaten Zab Judah, had built a welterweight record that placed him among the elite at 147 pounds. And he was the most physically imposing opponent Pacquiao had faced to that point in his career. Not the most technically gifted, not the most explosive, but physically the size, the strength, the specific body type that a man who had spent his entire career at welterweight developed. Cotto brought dimensions to the fight that De La Hoya and Hatton had not. Pacquiao handled it, not easily. Not with the one-sided dominance that the De La Hoya fight had produced. Cotto competed, made Pacquiao work, landed body shots that accumulated across rounds in a way that Pacquiao's previous opponents had not managed. But Pacquiao's combinations were faster, his angles were sharper. The specific combination of speed and power that had defined his career was present at welterweight, in the same form it had been present at super bantamweight 8 years earlier. Round 12. Pacquiao's combinations opened a cut above Cotto's eye. The referee stopped the fight. Technical knockout. Pacquiao, WBO welterweight champion. The first Filipino fighter to win world titles in 7 different weight classes. Cotto at number 5 because he was the toughest physical test of Pacquiao's career. The man who absorbed the most punishment before the fight was stopped, who competed the longest and competed hardest against a Pacquiao who was operating at the absolute peak of his powers. 4. Antonio Margarito. The 13th of November, 2010. Cowboys Stadium, Arlington, Texas. 1 year after Cotto, the same opponent who had beaten Cotto in 2008 inches, the fight where plaster had later been found in Margarito's hand wraps. Margarito had served a 1-year suspension, had been licensed to fight again, had beaten Cotto's compatriot Roberto Garcia and re-established himself as a significant presence in the junior middleweight division. The Texas Commission licensed him despite concerns about his right eye already damaged from previous fights and considered medically compromised going into the Pacquiao bout. 53,000 people attended at Cowboys Stadium. What they watched was not competitive. Pacquiao dismantled Margarito across 12 rounds with the kind of systematic precision that the best fighters produce against opponents who are physically bigger but technically overmatched. The right eye, the compromised one, began closing in the early rounds. By the later rounds, it was shut. The ringside doctor stopped it in round 12. Margarito's face after the fight told the story of 12 rounds of Pacquiao's combinations, landing on a man who could not solve the angles or the speed or the combination patterns, regardless of the size advantage he carried into the ring. Margarito at number 4, because the performance confirmed something the boxing world had been discussing since De La Hoya. Weight did not matter. Size did not matter. Against Manny Pacquiao at his peak, the physical advantages that defined heavyweight boxing were irrelevant in the lighter divisions because the speed and combination punching arrived before the size could be applied. 2 names remained, and both of them represented something different from everyone who came before them. 2 names remained, and they were different from everyone who came before them. Not because they were bigger, not because they hit harder, not because their physical tools were more extraordinary than the men Pacquiao had already handled across 9 fights and 10 years of the most celebrated run of victories the lighter weight classes had ever produced. Different because they did what nobody else managed to do across that entire era. They made Manny Pacquiao feel genuinely uncertain. 3. Shane Mosley. May 7, 2011. MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas. Shane Mosley was 39 years old, coming off a unanimous decision loss to Floyd Mayweather that most observers felt had confirmed what his previous results had been suggesting, that the peak years were behind him and what remained was a fighter whose name still carried commercial value, but whose physical tools had diminished past the point where elite opposition could be handled. The boxing world considered Mosley a manageable opponent for Pacquiao. Round 3 disagreed. Mosley landed a right hand that hurt Pacquiao visibly. Not a flash hurt the specific kind of hurt that experienced ringside observers recognized immediately as genuine. Pacquiao's legs reacted. His movement changed. The combinations that had been flowing with the fluid precision that defined his peak years became more cautious, more considered, as his body processed what the right hand had delivered. For a moment, for the specific duration of whatever Mosley's right hand had done to Pacquiao's equilibrium, the MGM Grand held its breath. Mosley pressed, came forward, tried to find the combination that would turn the moment into something permanent. Pacquiao survived. And then, as the round continued and the clarity returned, went back to doing exactly what he had been doing before the right hand landed. He won a unanimous decision, controlled the fight from round 4 onward with the same combination punching and footwork that had defined every peak performance of his career. But round 3 existed, and round 3 told the boxing world something that the previous 9 fights had not. Pacquiao could be hurt. Not just beaten Morales had done that in 2005, but hurt, rocked, put in a place where the outcome of the fight suddenly felt genuinely uncertain for the people watching. Mosley at number 3 because that right hand in round 3 was the closest any opponent in Pacquiao's peak era came to stopping him. The moment that reminded the sport briefly, intensely, that the man who had been operating like a force of nature was still human, still hittable, still capable of being put in a place where the ending was not guaranteed. One man had exploited that reality more completely than Mosley, and one had built a career around denying it entirely. Numeral dos. Juan Manuel Marquez. 4 fights, 36 rounds, 8 years. The most sustained, most contested, most debated rivalry boxing had produced at those weight classes in a generation. The 8th of May, 2004. The first fight. A draw that most observers felt Marquez had won after being knocked down 3 times in round 1. 12 rounds of counterpunching so precise and so consistent that a man who had been dropped 3 times in the opening 3 minutes had outboxed the most exciting fighter in the world for the remaining 33. The 15th of March, 2008. The second fight. Split decision for Pacquiao. The boxing world divided about the result. Marquez believing with the certainty of a man who had been inside those rounds that he had won. The 12th of November, 2011. The third fight. Majority decision for Pacquiao. The crowd at the MGM Grand booed. The scorecard said Pacquiao. The fight itself, 12 rounds of Marquez's counterpunching landing clean and hard, and consistently said something more complicated. And then the 8th of December, 2012. The fourth fight. Round 6, 10 seconds remaining. Pacquiao threw a jab. Marquez ducked under it, unloaded a straight right hand. It landed flush. Pacquiao fell forward, face first, completely unconscious before his body finished falling. The referee did not count. There was nothing to count over. Technical knockout. Marquez. The boxing world went silent. The man who had been beaten 3 times, who the official record said had won 1 fight and drawn 1 and lost 2 across 8 years, had ended the most dominant run in boxing with 1 right hand. Marquez at number 2 because across 36 rounds and 4 fights, he was the only opponent who solved Pacquiao completely, who studied him long enough and precisely enough to find the specific gap in the combination that arrived in round 6 of their 4th fight and put the most celebrated fighter of his generation face first on the canvas. Not just dangerous, the most technically dangerous man Manny Pacquiao ever faced. One name remained. The man who had not beaten Pacquiao with power or with a single right hand or with technical mastery built across 4 fights and 8 years. The man who had beaten him with patience. One Floyd Mayweather. May through 2015. MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas. $400 million. The richest fight in boxing history. 6 years of the most anticipated matchup the sport had produced since Ali versus Frazier. 6 years of negotiations and drug testing disputes and competing promotional structures, and the specific frustration of a boxing world that wanted one fight above all others and kept watching it fail to happen. It finally happened, and Pacquiao walked into that ring with a torn rotator cuff in his right shoulder, an injury sustained in sparring in April, 3 weeks before fight night. An injury that prevented him from throwing his right hand with the power and extension that the combination patterns Freddie Roach had built required. 12 rounds, unanimous decision, Mayweather. The boxing world booed. Not because the result was wrong in a technical sense. Mayweather had controlled the fight, had landed the jab, had clinched when Pacquiao tried to establish the close quarters exchanges that his style demanded. The judges had scored what they had seen. The world booed because what they had watched for 12 rounds was not the fight they had waited 6 years for. Because the injured shoulder revealed publicly after the fight had made the contest something other than the meeting of both men at their best, that the price and the anticipation and the 6 years of waiting had promised. Pacquiao demanded a rematch, a healthy rematch, one chance to show what the fight looked like when both men walked in whole. Mayweather retired, fought Conor McGregor instead. The rematch never happened. Mayweather at number 1, not because he was the most physically dangerous opponent on this list. Marquez's right hand was more dangerous in a single moment. Morales's technical sophistication was more consistently threatening across their first fight. Mayweather was number 1 because of what he represented across the entire arc of the rivalry. The 6 years of waiting, the shoulder, the denied rematch, the fight that cost Pacquiao more than any other, not just in competitive terms, but in the specific weight of an opportunity that arrived, damaged, and ended without resolution. The most dangerous rival Manny Pacquiao ever faced was the one he never got to fight healthy, and the one who made sure he never would. 10 rivals, 10 different dangers, from Ledwaba introducing him to America to Mayweather denying him closure. Manny Pacquiao faced them all, won most, lost some, and gave the sport 26 years of the most extraordinary competitive career the lighter weight classes have ever seen. If this list made you feel something, you already know what to do. Stay right here. More stories are coming.